Most child prodigies in the music industry come with a tragic expiration date. They burst onto the scene like brilliant meteors, mesmerizing millions with an undeveloped, raw talent, only to vanish into obscurity the moment adult maturity strips away their childhood novelty. The entertainment world is deeply stained with the devastating stories of young stars who simply couldn't survive the transition when their voices changed, or worse, who were completely hollowed out by the sheer greed of the corporate vultures surrounding them. But what happens when a little girl with a voice that sounds like a resurrected ghost from the 1930s grows up, and that voice doesn't fade, but instead sharpens into an absolute weapon? When Jordan first stepped onto a global stage at just 7 years old, the world widely assumed they were witnessing a clever vocal trick, a temporary phase of uncanny imitation. Today, however, industry insiders are waking up to terrifying reality. The girl they dismissed as a passing internet trend was actually an unstoppable force in the making, and the newly uncovered details of her recent career choices have exposed a shocking hidden war for her artistic soul. The world first encountered her as a seemingly fragile child, standing completely barefoot on the stage of Norway's Got Talent, belting out classic jazz standards with a heavy, devastating grief that made no sense for someone her age. While global audiences were instantly transfixed by the sound, public attention quickly divided over a highly unusual habit: her absolute refusal to wear shoes during any performance. Across early internet forums, wild rumors spread like wildfire, with cynics accusing her parents and television producers of forcing a cheap marketing gimmick to secure higher ratings and cheap sympathy. But the real story behind that choice was far more intense and deeply emotional. While traveling at an incredibly young age, had crossed paths with a penniless, shoeless young girl shivering on the street in freezing conditions. Without a single moment of hesitation, took off her own shoes and handed them to the stranger, vowing right then and there that as long as children continued to suffer and walk without shoes anywhere in the world, she would never wear footwear on stage again. It was the very first indicator that was not a corporate puppet to be managed, but an incredibly stubborn artist with a profound depth of character. And it was this exact stubbornness that would soon drag her into a massive, hidden conflict with the absolute rulers of Hollywood. But that was just the opening act of a much larger storm. As the years rolled on and began entering her teenage years, the sharks of the mainstream music industry began circling her like predators catching the scent of fresh blood. They viewed her as a multi-billion-dollar just waiting to be packaged, polished, and sold to the masses. Before long, Republic Records, a massive corporate giant responsible for some of the biggest names on the planet, locked her into an exclusive contract. To guarantee immediate mainstream success, they paired her directly with Gad, the legendary hitmaker behind some of the largest global pop anthems of the modern era. On paper, it looked like the ultimate golden ticket, a flawless high-speed highway designed to transform into the next dominant pop diva of the decade. Yet just as the entire industry expected her to release highly commercial, radio-friendly pop music, an absolute explosion occurred behind closed doors. Unexpectedly severed ties with the label, walked completely out of the corporate legal meetings, and walked away from a multi-million-dollar contract to become an entirely independent artist. Speculation instantly erupted within internal industry circles. Whispers emerged regarding a highly toxic creative clash inside the studio. Unverified insider leaks claimed that corporate executives were desperately trying to strip away her timeless jazz identity, demanding she transform into a generic, heavily auto-tuned pop product. They wanted to dictate her appearance, her style, and the very way she breathed in front of a camera. For, choosing between synthetic manufactured fame and the preservation of her artistic soul wasn't even a debate. She chose total freedom, and what she did next left the executives who doubted her shaking in their boots. Taking the independent route without the massive financial safety net of a major label is widely considered a form of career suicide for almost any modern musician, but for it was the exact moment of her liberation. However, this absolute freedom came with an incredibly heavy physical toll, particularly when it came to the evolution of her actual voice. The moment she took full control of her career, a dramatic, shocking shift occurred in her vocal structure. The gentle, smoky tone of her childhood suddenly transformed into an incredibly heavy, dark, and thunderous resonance packed with natural grit. This sudden change triggered a massive wave of panic among international vocal coaches and specialists. Experts began analyzing her live performance videos under microscopic detail, discovering something highly alarming. Was utilizing an incredibly aggressive form of vocal fry, and advanced subharmonics on a near-constant basis to achieve that haunting wall of sound effect. To an average listener, it sounded like pure vocal perfection, but vocal therapists warned that this hypermature technique could be pushing her physical limits to the absolute brink. Rumors began circulating across music forums that might be systematically destroying her vocal cords for the sake of dramatic artistic expression. Speculation regarding severe vocal cord bleeding or permanent nodules became a frequent topic of debate. Audiences braced themselves for the inevitable bad news that the young star was going to lose her instrument forever. Yet, every single time she stepped up to a raw live microphone, the power only doubled, completely shattering modern medical predictions and traditional theories of vocal health. The mystery only deepened when the public finally realized exactly where the emotional gravity of her lyrics was coming from. The vast majority of modern pop stars rely on massive rooms filled with dozens of professional songwriters in Los Angeles or Stockholm to manufacture algorithm-friendly hits. However, completely rejected this lazy, standard formula. She deliberately pulled away from the Hollywood social circles and retreated entirely into her tight-knit family unit to source the raw materials for her music. Recently, a fascinating reality was uncovered. The lyrics to her darkest, most earth-shattering independent tracks were not written by commercial industry veterans at all, but were actually direct adaptations of secret, deeply personal poetry written by her grandmother. These texts, filled with themes of historical trauma, isolation, and intense spiritual journeys, had been kept entirely hidden from the public eye for years. By locking her creative process inside an impenetrable family circle, built a fortress that corporate intervention simply could not touch. Her songs did not sound like consumer goods manufactured in a corporate studio. They felt like ancient, intimate rituals. This strict refusal to play by Hollywood's songwriting rules left playlist curators and mainstream radio directors utterly bewildered. They had absolutely no idea how to categorize her music because it continuously every single existing genre box. She was far too massive for standard pop music, yet far too dangerous and modern for traditional jazz. And when the industry tried to quietly suppress her by denying her radio airplay, launched a digital counteroffensive that completely broke the system. Instead of following the ancient industry blueprint of booking national television interviews, walking red carpets, or launching massive stadium tour backed by corporate sponsors, did something entirely unprecedented. She chose to completely vanish from the traditional promotional grid. While other artists spent millions on aggressive ad campaigns, simply sat down in an empty room, turned on a raw phone camera, and recorded herself singing legendary songs completely live, no pitch correction, no audio filters, and zero post-production editing. She dropped these unpolished, raw video performances onto the internet like unannounced audio bombs. The global response was staggering. Millions of viewers watched with absolute shock as a young woman effortlessly generated a massive, booming volume that could literally shake the walls of a room without a single piece of modern amplification equipment. This massive organic explosion caused an undercurrent of panic among traditional artist managers. Proved to the entire world that in the modern digital landscape, all the old power structures of Hollywood, from expensive public relations teams to restrictive contracts, could be rendered completely obsolete overnight if an artist possesses a talent so terrifyingly pure that the internet algorithms are forced to distribute it organically. She even began showing up for unannounced, spontaneous performances on stages in Las Vegas, pulling in massive crowds within a matter of hours purely through the power of digital word of mouth. And it was from this exact space of freedom that her final, most striking transformation took place. When you carefully look at the timeline of her development, it becomes incredibly clear that what is happening to Jordan right now is not a standard story of growing up. This is a highly rare generational cultural metamorphosis. Her voice has successfully transitioned from a fascinating childhood curiosity into a massive acoustic force capable of completely rewriting the rules of the global music landscape. She has navigated the incredibly dark, exploitative traps that have routinely destroyed the careers of countless young artists before her. When the system tried to buy her out, she chose independence. When the experts predicted her voice would completely collapse under the strain, she responded by singing with a resonance that could shatter a theater. Jordan has proven once and for all that true generational vocal power cannot be manufactured inside a corporate boardroom. It must be forged through an absolute, uncompromising commitment to artistic integrity. Now, with a voice that seems to grow more powerful, deep, and uncontrollable with every passing year, the mainstream music industry is forced to confront a highly uncomfortable new reality. This entire phenomenon forces us to look at the bigger picture and ask one final, critical question. Are we currently witnessing the beginning of the end for manufactured, factory-built pop stars? Or is Jordan a beautiful final anomaly before the music world is completely taken over by artificial intelligence and digital manipulation? One thing is absolutely certain: that voice is now far too large to be silenced, and the world has no choice but to listen.